we'll go over some of the rules real quick. So
All right.
protect yourself at all times.
Okay. I don't know what any of that means, but cool.
I don't know what that means either, man. That's just what they say before every boxing match. Yes.
No kicks to the groin.
Well, and now you're taking all the fun out of it.
I know we got to have groin kicks every once in a while.
Yeah.
I feel like you're more prepared than I am for it. If you have slides, you're definitely more prepared.
I noticed it's like you have a podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things that I noticed is that all of the podcasts out there have their own. They bring their own value.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that I don't think anybody's done yet is, so you've been in the private groups.
Mm-hmm.
You've been in the Facebook groups for years. And like we have these polished debates and these discussions on podcasts and videos. And then we go to the private Facebook groups. And, on a daily basis, home inspectors ripping each other apart, ripping each other to shreds. And I figured what we should do is take those topics that are the most hotly debated in the groups, and let's actually go hash them out in a meaningful way. Let's have some civil dialogue. And I've got Joe Denler. I'm going to bring him in as a guest also, because when we kick this off, what I'd like to do is kind of get his take from the legal side.
Well, I come armed only with my opinions and my reasons for them. It should be interesting.
So we're going to kick this off officially. I would like to introduce Ian Robertson. Ian is a veteran home inspector. As a matter of fact, he's been doing home inspections since before they were even done with online reporting. Back in the, the paper, the pencil and paper days, the clipboard. And we've had some really interesting discussions. I'm really happy to have you on tonight. Thanks for joining me. And do you want to just take a quick second to let people know, who you are and what you do?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Preston. I'm super excited, especially to be your first guest. My name is Ian Robertson. I own a couple of different home inspection companies. I own Full View Home Inspector Marketing, and I own Inspector Toolbelt, home inspection software. So I've been in multiple parts of the home inspection industry. I don't inspect with my own two eyes and hands anymore, so to speak. But I've been in just about the vast majority of this industry in one form or another for 19 years. I don't feel that old, but I'm told I look that old. So here we are.
Well, you're one of the best people I know. So thanks for being on. I want to give everybody kind of the reasoning for this podcast. I know we talked about it a minute ago, but the home inspection community online in the private groups tends to be sometimes a very vicious place where people disagree. And for me, my opinion is that one of the unfortunate things in this modern age is that we've kind of gotten to a point where so many of us think that if we disagree, we have to be enemies. And I've never subscribed to that theory, nor do I think it's good or healthy. And so I wanted to do a podcast that covered the hot topics, the hotly debated topics, the things that people fight about the most commonly in the groups, and just see if we can find some meaningful civil debate and see if, some people might be able to see some points they didn't think of. And this is a good one because you're of the opinion that walking a roof is the best inspection. Obviously I'm pro drone, so this is good for us to kind of hash this out.
Yeah. And if I could, I really like your format here too, because it gets rid of the whole keyboard cowboy persona. We'll all type things out a little bit differently than we will talking face to face with a person.
That's actually a great point. My wife mentioned that to me yesterday. Actually, she said, people don't talk to each other the same in person that they do behind a keyboard with the anonymity, and it's so much easier to be rude and hateful, I guess, behind a keyboard. But yeah. So all right, let's start off. So what is your position when it comes to doing the best roof inspection?
So if I were to summarize my opinion, I'm not anti-drone. As a matter of fact, I started using drones well before they were regulated by FAA. So they started to get regulated around 2016. I think the laws became enacted in August 2016, introduced in April 2016. I've been using drones since well before that. I'm not anti-drone, but I do think our industry has become too reliant on drones. It's the old expression, when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So my position is it's a tool in our toolbox, but it should not be our primary method of inspection or the preference of our inspection. If I were to sum up actually how I would say it, an inspection of a roof with a drone is a visual inspection only. And we love to say that our inspections it's a visual inspection. That's what it says in most SOPs. But if that's true, how many of us are really going to do a great service for our clients walking around not touching light switches, won't open a doorknob because it's a visual inspection only? We won't put our hand over the heating unit to see if it's overly hot, or, touch this or listen to that. If we walk around saying it's a visual only, we're not going to be in business for very long. So my
All right,
position is,
stop.
why
Let
would we?
me
Yeah.
stop you there for once. All right, so let's address that topic, because that's actually a common statement when these arguments come up.
Mhm.
Now, we would agree that doorknobs and light switches and even controls on a stove, which are meant to be controlled, are different than what you would do invasively or even destructively on a roof.
Mhm.
So I think one question I have for you is, if we take the standard statement in most SOPs, which is home inspections are visual, non-invasive, non-destructive.
Mhm.
Okay, we agree those three things are the basis of a home inspection.
Yeah.
Now, yes, we're going to go above and beyond that. Yes, we're going to do things. We're going to manipulate, touch, pull, that sort of thing. But
Mhm.
what are the things on a roof that can commonly be manipulated with your hands or tools or whatever? What is it you could do on a roof that isn't visual, that isn't going to be destructive?
Oh, quite a bit actually. So there's a common mantra of I do only drone inspections. It's I can see better with a drone than I can with my own two eyes. I get a bird's eye view. And I acquiesce to that point. Yeah, I can't fly up in the air and get a bird's eye view and go, oh, hey, look, those are a little uneven. But in reality, there's more function to a roof than is it leaking or not. And I hear inspectors say that, hear agents especially say that. Is it leaking or is it not? That's its only function. That's not its only function. A roof the roof covering, more accurately said, needs to be able to be serviceable as well. To be serviceable, it needs to be able to be walked. You need to be able to go up and have the cable guy be able to stand on the roof long enough to address whatever he's doing, or the satellite guy, or a mason come up and work on your chimney, all of those things. So if you look through the information on most roofing, let's talk about asphalt or fiberglass shingles. They actually have a rating for how you walk on it, how much weight it can take, and all that stuff, because it needs to be serviceable. So with just a drone, all you really see is how does it look, and are there any installation defects? I'll give you one example. I did an inspection of a house, brand new roof. They advertised a roof, brand new, no attic access, and that roof was not. Most people would say that you could not get to it. I bent over backwards to try to get to that roof. They ended up using particle board. They were also dumping their sewage into the river behind, and they had a black water fine and all that. So this was a crazy house to begin with. But the first step I took on that roof, my foot started to go sink down into the roof in between the framing. Just that one step, and I said, nope, fail. I failed a brand new roof. If I had not done that, a drone would never have been able to see that, and I wouldn't have been able to, in the attic, to get to it.
All right. So, but I want to back up. I want to touch on that topic. That's the soft sheathing argument that I hear really commonly in the groups. But going back to the question of what is it that you can do on a roof that is invasive or manipulative with your hands, that, what exactly is it you can do that you can't do with a drone?
Well, for instance, I love to touch the bottoms of the shingles to see if they lift up easily. I also like to look at the end of the roof and make sure that it's sealed. One of the, when they're installing a roof and you have that glue strip at the bottom, I always see the roofers, I say always, a lot of times when I see this defect, they've installed it upside down. So now the bottom of the flap of the roof, the bottom shingle, kind of flaps up in the wind. Those end up blowing off like crazy whenever you get a heavy wind. Things like that, being able to look at the chimney flashing and go, okay, is this really tucked in behind the brick, or is this just some cob job that looks good from a distance?
Gotcha.
Or the other thing is the spark arrestor on chimneys. I'd love to give those a little wiggle. I had a client one time where it blew right off.
So, all right. So if you're checking the storm cap or the spark arrestor, if you're checking that with your hands, now you live in a region that's similar to mine, right? So
Yeah.
I would assume that because you're up near Albany, is that right?
Yeah.
I think you're in a little bit more of an kind of an urban setting than I am. It's more rural where I'm at. But do you find that commonly chimneys are very tall and you can't actually get to the storm cap or the spark arrestor?
I would say half, and actually most of our territory is pretty rural. I would say we're probably on the 60% rural, 40% relatively urban, including suburbs.
Okay.
Um, but I do find that a lot of them are too high, probably half and half. But we have a lot of ranches around here. And that's just one example of the things that we check. In the ranches, you're going to have that, um, you know, 612 or 1212 pitch or whatever, and then the
Right.
chimney's going to be just about a little bit over the peak of the roof. So they're not really that hard to kind of get up there and wiggle. And sometimes I'll pull the baton out of my bag and I'll just kind of push on it a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just a little extra something. But the
Yeah. I'm
bottom's full of
about,
shingles.
I would say I'm probably at a 60% rate with chimneys that are too high to actually access
Yeah.
both the clay flue liner or the storm cap. So that's a good chunk. Like if you're even if we take your number of half, that means half the roofs you can't touch, and that would be a great instance to use a drone. I would argue.
Oh yeah, and I would actually agree with that argument. So there's an area in my service area with like old Victorian homes and stuff like that. I get to as much of the roof as I can, but there are times where I'm just like, I'm not getting up there, not without a bucket lift.
Yeah.
So I'm not bringing a bucket lift here. So the only other thing to do is a drone to give them a good inspection.
Right.
So
Well,
yeah,
we're gonna take a pause real quick. So that was a good segment. I'm gonna bring in somebody right now as a guest. Joe Denneler. He's a lawyer from Elite MGA. He's in the
nice.
green room. Looks like we got a couple other people that have called in. I'm gonna put the phone number on the screen here in a minute as well after we get Joe on.
Is my mom
So
calling?
not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
All right. Oops. Let me see if I can.
Hey,
All
Joe.
right, there we are. Hey, Joe.
Hey, everybody.
All right, real quick, 10 seconds. Who are you and what do you do?
I'm Joe Denler. I'm the chief counsel and the chief cook and bottle washer at Elite MGA. I manage the claims for our captive insurance company that insures home inspectors all across the United States.
And I'm going to say you are far too humble because you are not only one of the most respected people in our industry, but you are absolutely the top lawyer that you know our industry better than a lot of us do. Because man, I've heard you rattle off statutes and SOP. That state the SOP is different, and you'll just tell me right off the top of your head. So, all right, thanks for being on. So Ian and I are arguing right now, and we're not getting along. He's starting to sweat.
And yell. Yeah, I'm getting pretty angry.
His mom's going to call me names when she calls in, I guess. All right, Joe. So real quick, we're talking about the debate whether it's better to walk a roof or better to use a drone.
Right.
Now, from the legal perspective, from the insurer's perspective, I was kind of hoping that you'd give me some ammo. So I did ask you two questions ahead of the time, but you're not going to help me at all. But what is the legal opinion here? Like if you had your druthers, what would it be?
Well, there's a couple things. So this would fall into what we call a general liability incident in our program, where if somebody were to damage the roof, then the insurance would kick in and cover that. And so there would certainly be a better chance of that happening if somebody's walking it versus not. But that is what it is. There's either a presence of somebody there or there isn't. As I told you, most of mine involve people falling through ceilings from attics, not through roofs. And I haven't had a claim that relates to somebody damaging the roof. So from a legal standpoint, it really comes down to satisfying the standard of care. And so the standard of care would not require an inspector to walk the roof. And I think every standard that I can think of either says the inspector chooses, or here's some ways the inspector is permitted to do it, as long as the client knows what's going on. I think drone, if we're talking about it in terms of preventing risk, I think we can get a good amount from the drones as to whether there's a defect or not, because that's the primary thing, right? It's
yes on the inspection side, but you handle my liability insurance, right?
right.
So if I fall off a roof and land on somebody's Ferrari, that's a problem because
Absolutely.
So from that perspective, that's also risk liability, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if we're the ones who are going to have to pay the freight if the roof gets damaged from an inspector being on it, then it would always be our preference to not have somebody walk the roof.
Well,
Yeah.
let me ask you.
All right.
Let me ask you something, Joe, because I'd actually like to know this. So we're just talking about general liability. We're not including E&O. So an E&O claim can be quite a bit more than a general liability. I fall through a ceiling. All right, $2,000. Somebody goes in, fixes the ceiling. Big deal. And it sounds like you haven't had a claim where somebody's fallen through a roof or damaged a roof
Right.
like that. But now, what if you had an E&O claim because they couldn't get into the attic, they didn't walk the roof on a one-story house, and they only did drone footage? And standard of care is a pretty loose term for basically what is everybody else in the industry doing.
Well,
so if my
no,
company, well, I mean,
that's not true.
SOP,
No.
but
Yeah.
there is a level of it. But so now, would you rather have a $30,000 roof E&O claim or a $2,000 I stepped on the roof and broke it claim?
Well, just getting back to the SOP part, it depends on the state you're in. But if you're in a state that has standards that are codified into the law, then those are the standards the inspector is going to be judged by, not what anybody else does on other inspections in that state. So it's always going to be that it's always going to be the standard of care is going to be whatever is codified under the law, and it's not going to matter much what other people are doing. So
I would argue that if you're doing a drone roof inspection, that's going to be properly covered in your narrative and properly disclaimed with limitations, right?
Well, yeah. So most of the statutes that deal with it will say that you have to tell the client how you're doing it. And as you know, we've had this discussion before where I see problems is that the inspector does it without walking it, or says the easier one to explain is where they do it from, they're looking at it from a ladder, or they're not getting the bird's eye view from a drone and they're not walking it either. In those situations, they're obligated to tell the client how they did it, but they also need to tell the client what that does in terms of their ability to inspect this property. For example, it's not enough to say, hey, I did it from the ground with binoculars and everything looks good, because there's no possible way you saw everything there was to see. And so where inspectors mostly fall short on that is they tell them how they did it, but they don't really disclose the limitations that causes. So Ian, to your point, it's a different inspection. And for that reason, they have to be clear. And so in terms of how it affects an E&O claim, if the inspector is clear in identifying the limitations that their choice of an inspection method caused, then it's not really an E&O problem whether they're in a drone or walking the roof. That's a bigger issue, because now they've only made a representation out as to what it is they actually saw or were able to experience.
Well, that's good input, Joe. I appreciate you. And you and I both agree that Ian's wrong, and I appreciate that perspective.
I still believe I'm right.
I have a unique perspective, because it's our, when we're dealing with it, it's a function of, what do the claims cost? And so I'm not thinking about it in terms of, the client experience very often.
Well, I appreciate you making time to jump on, Joe. Thank you very much. I know you're a busy guy.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care.
See you, Joe.
Yep.
All right, Ian. So you lost that round, man.
I don't know. I feel like I won it. Joe never really answered my question about E&O versus general liability. Those are two different claims.
You're right.
I think I did stump him a little bit.
No, I'm willing to agree with you there that there's limitations. And so it's interesting, because as I went through all of my slides and all the stuff I was preparing to kick your butt tonight, I had to be very real about the limitations. If I had to pick, and this is a good question for you. If in your area you get a lot of tall old farmhouses, 2-3 story homes, 12 pitch stuff, we're definitely not going to walk that roof.
Mm-hmm.
How do you inspect it?
Well, like I said, we started using drones a long time ago. We'd use decapoles, and I haven't really met too many roofs that we've not been able to get on. And if there's really a roof where my 40-foot ladder wouldn't reach, and I'd only bring it when I knew I was going to do one of those houses, or it wasn't safe, I do the same disclaimer that I do when it's raining. I'm not getting on a roof when it's raining. So I write, hey, this was not safe to walk on. Here's the reasons why. And I use this very sparingly. And then I would recommend a roofer to come and complete the inspection. Never had a problem. I had one client that got a little huffy, and then they wanted like part of the inspection back for the roof, and then they kind of got over it, and they're like, you know what, that's fine. That makes sense.
You're bringing a 40-foot ladder to walk those roofs?
That thing comes out 2 times a year at most. I usually try to avoid those houses, but I do want to talk about something.
But that would be inspection from the eave on the ladder. You're not climbing onto a 12-12 or a 10-12.
No. But I do want to talk about that standard of care. So Joe did talk about standard of care, and he's an attorney, and I'm not, so I'm not going to belabor the point. But standard of care is actually based on 2 things: standards of practice, and also what is called reasonable practices. So there's a couple of legal precedents for it. The T.J. Hooper case in 1932, the Darling versus Charleston case in 1965, Healing versus Carey in 1974. And basically what those cases and all the other ones that I'm not going to read here in front of the whole audience say is that within reasonable distinction, what others in your industry are doing as they considered a standard is applied to standard of care for your clients. So the reason I bring that up is it's very important that if I was making a case as an attorney saying, hey, this roof was bad, my client, your inspector didn't walk it, I'd like to have a $30,000 claim on the insurance. What they're going to do is they're going to go ask other inspectors in the area, do you walk roofs? As you're part of your standard inspection, what % of the roofs do you walk? Would you have walked this roof? And then a guy like me, where all of us, we walk roofs, and then we're going to go, yeah, we walk every roof. Because you know what? If you don't, you're not going to find this defect or that defect or this defect. And then the attorney is going to go, that third thing you mentioned is the defect that he missed. So that's why I bring up the standard of care. Joe is very, very right in what he's saying. The standard of care is strictly based on SOP, but it has a broader sense with precedent in that it applies to what is everybody else in your industry doing as a standard.
Okay, I mean that's a good point. If you're in an industry where 99% of the inspectors are going to walk that roof and you don't, there you have a problem. All right, real quick, I'm going to throw something up on the screen real quick. I want to give people.
I do want to make a point for your argument, though. That could come back on me too. Say I walk the roof, but I don't use a drone, and everybody in the area uses a drone.
Well, I was going to get to that. So you don't worry, man. I got notes. I'm ready for this fight.
I took a laptop for you.
All right. So if you want to call in, if you got an opinion, I got 2 people in the green room now. We're going to bring those guests in a second. But if you want to call in, if you have a point, if you want to argue about this, or you think we're missing something, there's the phone number. Give us a call. We've got somebody standing by begrudgingly. So I just wanted to kind of show this for a second.
I feel like this is 3 a.m. on PBS, and we're doing a show for we'll send you a DVD of PBS. Remember those?
I do. It's funny. I just did some stuff on TikTok about the whole Ed McMahon and the Publishers Clearinghouse check.
Oh yeah, I saw that. It actually wasn't Ed McMahon, right? Or it wasn't the other guy.
It wasn't Publishers Clearinghouse. He worked for American Family Publishers.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That kind of broke my brain. Group psychosis, they call that, right?
Yep. All right. So I agree with you on the point about, if you ever ended up in court. All right. But here's an argument that I'm going to make, because this was actually a real scenario for me. I had a client. This was in 2022 at the end of the year when I first started using the drone. Mm-hmm. And I did an inspection, and about 4 or 5 months later, the client moved into the house and the roof was leaking. And they called me very upset and said, your inspection said that the roof looked good. The roof is leaking. And they said, we had the roof inspected. I'm sending you the pictures. We want you to pay for the new roof covering. We want you to pay for the damage. So I got that information, and I'm looking at the photos, and I went back to my drone photos. Now, on average, and this is something that a lot of people don't know, when I do a roof inspection with a drone, I just finished a training video, by the way, where I show exactly how I do it. I'm shooting the roof from five specific vantage points. And I take hundreds of photos. It's usually between 200 and 300 photos of a roof, depending on the size of the house. So I went back to the drone photos and pulled them up and took their photos. And I was able to show that roof sustained damage after I had inspected it. And I sent over all 200 photos to the client and said, and I circled on the roof where the roof was damaged. And I said, that was not there the day I did the inspection. And it was like the whole problem vanished for me because something happened after I inspected it. Now I suspected it was tree branch damage. But at the end of the day, had I not had those drone photos, I very likely would have had to have been on the hook for that damage. And as you know, in this region, roofs can be $20,000, $30,000. Mm-hmm. So that's not an insignificant problem. And that was the moment that I really kind of embraced the power of the drone footage and documenting that. Now, if you walk a roof and you don't take photos, how do you protect yourself 4 or 5 months down the road?
Well, I think you're making two different arguments there. The argument for drone usage is more about taking photos to cover yourself. I'll take 30, 40, 50 photos of a roof. I'm just walking around taking all sorts of different angles of pictures. It's not comparing apples to apples if you walk the roof but don't take pictures. What if you...
No, I think it is. I think it is, apples and apples, because here's why. And I'm going to tell you right now what my driveway presentation is to clients. Mm-hmm. And what I tell them is, if I'm using the drone on the roof, what I tell them is, today I'm going to be using a drone for your roof. There are certain limitations to that. And one of the limitations is I won't be able to tell you everything here today as part of the synopsis. This is something I have to go back home and study the footage and actually update the report with that information. So what I tell you today could change by the time you get your report. But here's what I'm going to do. I promise you that I'm going to shoot every square inch of that roof in high resolution up close. And if there are ants crawling on the granules of that asphalt, shingle, I'm going to see it and I'm going to let you know it. And I always see the look on their faces like, wow, this guy's not messing around. So it is for documentation purposes, but it is also for the ability to go study that roof and zoom in on things and to really take a look, because at the end of the day, one of the arguments I want to make today is a lot of the stuff that people fight about results at the same destination, because the destination for us is the recommendation. We're either going to recommend further evaluation by a roofing contractor, repair by a roofing contractor, or it could be flashing, it could be a chimney sweep, mm-hmm. or something. So if we arrive at the same destination to say, I walked the roof and saw a loose shingle or saw a problem, and I recommended further evaluation by a roofing contractor, and then I did the same thing with a drone, we both accomplished the same end result, which is get someone to look at that.
Yeah, but your question was, what if I walk the roof and don't take pictures? If I walk the roof and take pictures, so if I took the same number of pictures you do with the drone, I still have the same documentation. I can still go back. The one thing, the one advantage,
but do you do that?
I take a lot of pictures of the roof.
Do you take every square inch of that roof?
I do. Personally, okay. I do. And I get behind the chimneys and everything, because I've been in the industry long enough, like the one thing you don't take a picture of is the one thing that somebody's going to come back at. Now, does all that go in my report? No. I usually just take out my camera and just go boom, 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 boom. And I have a Dropbox with however many terabytes that is just stored. Oh man, I couldn't even guess how many photos over the years.
Same.
And I also love video, so I take video. As a matter of fact, one of the things I do when I leave an inspection is I turn my video camera on. I say goodbye to everybody. I videotape myself walking out, getting in my car, buckling my seatbelt, and as I drive off, I turn it off. The reason I do that is that has actually saved me several times when people say, you did damage, or when you left, you forgot to turn the lights off, or something big, something small. One time it saved me from a heating unit issue. And I'm like, I wasn't the last one in there. The three of you were, and the heating unit was running. You can hear it on my video. Right. The agent never referred me again, but the selling agent's like, this guy knows his stuff, and they referred me. But I'm all about that. I think that comes more down to the picture part. I think more comes down to the diligence of the home inspector, because you can go up there with a drone and not be diligent about recording what you see and taking, or even having a really high quality drone. If you have a drone with fuzzy pictures that are only 720p, it's like, okay, let's get something with a higher resolution photo on it and some video. And I will acquiesce that, you know what, I cannot fly up into the air to get the wide angle shots, to get a whole big shot of the roof. I can't get that. I can't fly. So but I think a combination of the two, use the drone as a tool instead of the hammer where every problem becomes a nail.
No, and I agree with you on that one. I do agree that it's another tool in the toolbox, and it doesn't always apply. But what I will say is that there's been a couple of instances in the last couple of years, not a lot, but enough to make me very thankful that I use a drone, which is when you're up high getting that tall, the first area, what I call the macro view, the first macro view, which is the whole roof. That's a really interesting perspective because sometimes you see thermal patterns or you see things that connect the dots. You can see like a water pattern or rust coming off of something, and you see the staining. And when you see that staining coming down the side of the house, that's something that you may not have realized from walking the roof, because walking the roof, you got a 6-foot vantage point. And then maybe you get down closer to look at something, but you don't get a 50-foot, view from above the roof. And that has been advantageous.
I only have a 5'11" view, so you might have the 6-foot view. You get an extra inch, and then you get better view of things. But no, and I do agree. There is a huge advantage with that. And there have been times where I'll give you an example of where I wished I had a drone before I started using them. There was this roof of this guy who's super shady. He was a well-known appraiser in our area. And he's like, oh, brand new roof. And I'm looking at the top of this thing, wonky, crazy, huge house. And I'm like, there's no way he paid to have somebody go to the top of that roof. I bet you he skipped it. I know this guy. I nearly died getting up there. And I got the worst photo of it. And I had to sit down and calm myself down because I almost fell off this roof. And I'm like, I need a drone. But you know what? If I had a drone, it would have been zip. Oh yeah, look, there it is. And it was a whole big section of the roof and it ended up being very expensive. But it oh hey, there's somebody else here. Hi.
Sorry, I accidentally clicked to add him to the stage right when you were talking. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. And he came in all arms crossed, and I'm like, wait, is this the point where the actual fighting starts? This is MMA over here. I don't know what's going on. I have to say,
this is part of my strategy is to interrupt you with yes,
sweet,
before you can make valid arguments.
Oh, good.
I'm not letting you in tonight, Ian. I'm sorry. So I'm bringing in my muscle, Fletch.
Nice. Okay.
Get him.
How we doing? Brent Fletcher. I'm out of Colorado.
Hey, Brent.
How we doing? I would have to side with Ian. You're more on the ladder or the roof side, right?
Yeah.
I would have to go that route, and I can give you a quick story as of why. When I first started doing home inspections, I was working with a roofing company that would come out with me a lot and just kind of give me the ropes of what they were thinking. Now, I did this one roof, and it had a decent amount of granular loss, and I probably would have put it about halfway through its service life. And the roofing company agreed with me. The next week I did another roof. It was exactly the same roof. It looked exactly the same to me. So I put that in there. They go out and evaluate it, and they say it's at the end of its service life. Now I got to talk to the clients because there's you said it was halfway through and it's at the end. So the roofing company walked the roof with me a little bit later, and he showed me that what I didn't realize from the first to the second roof was all the it was all the edges were unsealed now. Now, I wouldn't have been able to see that by just looking at it. And he was going through and lifting up every single shingle across the whole roof. And as for just a bird's eye view, I would never would have caught that. So that was
all right. So let me ask you this question. And this is something you and I haven't talked about roofs prior to this call. And what is when somebody uses a drone for a roof inspection? What is it exactly you think that they're doing with that drone? Give me your synopsis of what you think occurs.
I think it's a good bird's eye view. You're going to get pictures of every angle. You're going around, but you're not getting hands on. You're not going to be able to touch things. You're not going to be able to put up close to it. It's a tool, and I think it's a great tool for a lot of areas. I use a Doka pole. It's in a sense where you.
Yeah, but here's why I asked you that question. And this is one of the things that I don't see brought up in the groups very often when these arguments, and believe me, I've seen people that were like ready to fist fight in the street over this topic.
Yeah.
So what I will say is that the biggest misconception that I see is that people assume that we fly a drone up in the air, shoot straight down at the roof, take 6 or 7 photos, put the drone away, and go inspect the house.
Mhm.
And that's very frustrating for me because a good roof inspection takes me between 20, 25 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes, because I'm taking hundreds of photos at 5 different levels, starting at macro, coming down to mid macro. I'm then getting all the way down to micro level where I'm literally 12 inches from the shingles. And when I'm 12 inches from the shingles with a 4K camera, I can see the substrate. Like I can literally see the fiberglass through.
But does that have a little forklift on it that will lift up all the shingles for you to see if they're properly sealed?
I'm glad you brought that up. Because as you see in the groups, I have a Doka pole with a hook on it that is specifically for that purpose. So what I do is that manipulation. If I can't get on the roof and I have to use a drone for that inspection, I'm breaking out the Doka pole and I will hover the drone above and then lift on the shingles and record in video me lifting the shingles, pulling on the flashings, pulling on cornice returns, whatever. I will manipulate things with the Doka pole and record it this far away from the drone. And that's something that I can study when I go back home, as I can see under those shingles and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's I'm gonna leave you 2 things. My kid's starting to yell at me. But whenever I use a Doka pole whenever I need to, and whenever I'm doing that, I put into my inspection report that that's a limitation, that I did not walk, to show that it's not as thorough as if I was walking the roof. And the second,
if you don't walk the roof, how do you inspect it?
The second thing I'll add to that, I do a lot of new builds out here, and the first thing that's going to come when you're doing new builds is pretty much all the builders out here won't let you walk the roof. And that's a limitation that we can't go up there for whatever reason. Now I use my Doka pole. I'm still going to do the inspection of it, but I believe it is because they don't want as thorough of an inspection of the roof, because anytime you get up there, you can usually find something.
Amen, man.
All right, man. I'm going to kick you out because
kiddo.
No, it's getting awkward because I've known you for like several years and I know you don't have children.
Don't worry about it.
I'm just kidding, Fletch.
All right, man. You guys have a good one. I'll keep on listening.
Later. All right, take care. All right, so Ian, that's one of the things I had in my questions tonight, is I knew that a lot of people were going to say, if I can't walk the roof, I use a Doka pole. Now, I used to use a Doka pole for roof inspections until I realized how inadequate they were in a lot of ways. Yeah. They're not great. Like I can't get those views. And in our region, as you know, he's doing new build inspections. You go to a 200-year-old farmhouse with cornice returns and you want to see inside there. You want to see if there's any wood destroying insect damage, pest activity, whatever, carpenter bee holes, all the stuff we see on a daily basis. There's no real way to get Doka poles into all that stuff. And so I didn't want the debate to really be Doka pole versus drone, but if you can't walk the roof, I really don't see a good argument for falling back on a Doka pole and saying good enough when you have a drone option.
I agree with that.
Agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And that's still my stance. When the job calls for a specific tool, yeah, that's the tool. But there's a buddy of mine that has one of those multi-tools, that has a little vibrating blade on it so that you can do coping cuts, and you can, he'll use it for cabinets and all that stuff. Right. But I know some other guys that they use it for everything. Like they're like, oh, I need to cut this piece of tile out of the corner, and now I need to cut this wire out of there. They're using it like a Sawzall, and they have all these weird attachments. And I'm like, yeah, it's a good tool, but it shouldn't be used all the time. And I feel that way about drones. I think they're overused. And here's some stigma that kind of goes with drones. So first of all, there's new legislation that they're pushing for, because everybody freaked out recently with New Jersey and New York with all the drones flying over them. So right now, they just passed legislation where you can't fly drones over Staten Island and most of New York City. And then other municipalities are starting to say, our neighborhood does not like drones. So I had a buddy of mine, an inspector, his wife and kid are in the backyard, and somebody flew a drone into their backyard and was just there. So some places are saying, listen, you can't fly a drone in our neighborhood. So those laws are becoming more prominent. So here's the stigma that comes. So, we build websites for home inspectors. We have our clients that do drone footage for our reporting system and stuff like that. I am still amazed at how many are, number one, not licensed by FAA. So it's FAA Part 107 commercial, where you have to be licensed. And then the part that I see most guys miss, even if they're licensed, is they have not registered their drone with the FAA. Because just like an airplane, you need to register your drone with the FAA.
All right, I want to tell you that's a low blow, and I know what you're asserting here. But look, I have my license.
Oh no, I know you do. Oh yeah, no,
I'm just kidding, man.
No, I know you do. But but it gives it a bad name, and it gave it a bad name early on in the whole drone thing. Like one of my competitors is like, "Ian's using a drone. I'm going to use a drone." I had this old Parrot, but he used it, crashed into somebody's window, got it stuck in a tree, and people were like, "That guy's an idiot." And now everybody in the area is just like, you're an idiot if you use a drone. So that stigma is gone. That was a long time ago. But the other stigma of, God, we're not using it right. Like how wasn't the last time that we checked the FAA no-fly map when we went out and did an inspection? Did we kind of sneak it in a little close to an airport, even though we're not supposed to fly it there? How many of us check the local municipality that's not on the no-fly report, but we can't fly a drone there? Most of us don't do that level of research. And so now it does open us up for liability, because there was a case that I looked up just before about a neighbor who got caught in the video their house got caught in the video of a drone while they were inspecting a different house. And then her insurance premium went up, which was probably completely unrelated. But then she blamed the guy who was flying the drone next to her house, and it created a whole bunch of legal issues.
It's funny that you brought up the drone sensitivity issue. So I personally have my own opinions about drone use, and I think it comes down to intention and purpose. Yeah. And the one thing that I don't think you can, that you can't infringe on, is the constitutional right to freedom of press. And so I think it's really hard to say you flew the drone to look at this roof because you're a home inspector, not because you're a journalist or going to use it for dissemination publicly somehow. So I think there's going to be some arguments and some legal fights that happen, because if you're in public, you can film or videotape anything that you can see from a public space. Period.
Yeah, Google has set that precedent many years ago with Google Maps.
Definitely. Yeah. So if they're going to get rid of the drones or pass laws, I think that we're going to see some constitutional arguments. All right, on the screen right now, one of the things I want to show you is, all right, you look at this roof right here, and you see some deterioration and some holes in this roof, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, we would agree that you would find that if you walked the roof, and we would agree that you would see that, with a drone, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the question that I have is, when you can get in even closer with a drone to see little things like this, which you probably would still see if you're walking the roof.
Mm-hmm.
The question that I have is, what's the difference?
Well, the difference is you're showing a tiled roof here. The difference is a lot. Touch, feel, sensitivity of the tiles. Is the roof serviceable? So outside of a fiberglass asphalt shingle roof or anything like that, I've inspected maybe 2 tile roofs in my entire career. They just don't exist in my area. So I don't know what we're looking for there. But like a metal roof, so let's go to a different roofing system. You go to a metal roof. I don't walk a ton of those, because a lot of times they're very steep pitch and you really can't, not without harnessing. But if I'm going to walk that, I want to know, is it going to be able to support my weight? Is it spongy to walk on? Did they space their framing too far or not far enough? And yeah, visually speaking, a drone is going to see everything that a human being can, and from more perspectives than the human being can. The difference is touch and feel. So I'll give an example of another component. So one thing that we're worried about as an industry ultimately is the whole virtual inspection thing that AI is trying to push to. You can take a
Right.
picture, it'll tell you what the defects are. I walked into a house one time, and I still remember this. Beautiful, beautiful stone floor, and is half a mansion. I went and walked on it. Everything seemed fine. Something didn't, quote unquote, feel right to me. And my client's just like, it's fine. Let's stop worrying about a floor. There's bigger parts of this house. I have this thing where I drop my heels. I dropped my heels and the floor moved. He goes, what was that? I'm like, something's not right. Drop my heels again. We found out that the entire subfloor had been rotted out. There was a leak happening somewhere. I forget the exact parts of it, but you couldn't get to this section of crawl space. It was expensive. So now imagine a drone flying into that room, takes a picture. It can't see what I felt.
Then I agree with you. And, floors are meant to be walked on. Roofs aren't necessarily meant to be walked on. They're meant to be serviced. And so this was something I researched a little bit before this call, was to find out what roof coverings are rated for what type of foot traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And I found some interesting stuff. I brought up this picture right here. This is an actual inspection that I did. This is actually a typical kind of inspection for my region.
What's up with that fascia?
So, I mean, you see my videos, you know what stuff I inspect on a regular basis. But all right, first question, would you walk that roof?
I'd probably go into the attic first because it looks like they're missing collar ties up in the attic. Am I right? Because that ridge is really, really sagging. Or they raise the rafter ties to get like a little bit higher ceiling in one of those bedrooms.
No, and you were right. There was no collar ties. And this is a really, really common, ridge sag that we see out here quite a bit.
Is that 3-tab shingle too?
I actually don't remember on this one. I can zoom into this.
Yeah, man, you told me you could zoom in on those high resolution photos. So let's take a look. Yeah, so it's 3-tab shingle, and it looks like they raked the shingles. So those are not offset enough, and they raked them, which you're not supposed to do with a 3-tab. Sure,
but now I think you just made my point. You just made that assessment by looking at a drone photo from 50 feet away. Now, my second question would be, would you walk that metal roof?
Probably not, because that actually looks like it's probably framed with 2x4s,
right,
and not meant for human walking. So they're usually going to be built in a grid. So
sure,
that one I probably would not walk.
And I would argue as well. And I've talked to, so I've had arguments with roofing contractors dozens of times, obviously in my region, especially. They love to put screws in the ribs, and I have to argue with them about that not being best practice. But anyway, when I talk to metal roof manufacturers, they say that metal roofs, it's really bad actually to walk on them. Just generally, it's bad to walk on them because the failures are usually the neoprene washers and the fasteners.
Mm-hmm.
And that when you walk on them, everything deflects, it moves, and that's actually something that can promote leakage.
Mm-hmm.
And so just as a general rule, I typically don't walk metal roofs unless there's a reason to. So here's going to be part of my argument for tonight. The thing that drives me crazy the most when this debate comes up is everybody argues drone or walk the roof as if it's an either or concept.
And it's not.
Either walk it, it really isn't. Here's the thing that I tell people all the time, and this resulted in an online feud with another home inspector claiming that I don't walk roofs. I use a drone 100% of the time on all inspections. I always start with the drone. Always. I fly it up. I take 200-300 photos. I get everything. You name it, eave soffits, fascia, flashing, chimney cap, you name it, everything. And then because I'm looking at it on screen, I can then make an assessment as to whether there's something important enough for me to walk a roof that I normally wouldn't. Okay. So like this roof here, I normally wouldn't walk that roof, but I actually did. I walked that roof.
High five.
So, but I inspected the attic first because that gets into the sheathing argument. People say, well, how are you going to assess soft sheathing if you don't walk on the roof? Well, I think we can all agree that walking on a roof with soft sheathing is a bad idea. This is how people fall through roofs and get hurt. So I don't think that's a valid argument that I like to go up and bounce around on a soft sheathing to see if it's soft or not. That to me is a very dumb assertion. And having said that, I inspected the attic. I went through the whole thing to make sure it looked like I could walk on it. And then I did walk on that roof because I saw some bigger problems up there. But then when we jump to a photo like this, here's a great example of something that nobody walking a roof would ever see. Okay, that picture right there, unless you're crawling over the edge and hanging your head down, which I've never seen an inspector do.
I do.
You're
My wife doesn't like it.
well,
yeah.
I think for some things, yes, but like, if you're 60
This is
feet
a hard
up in the
spot.
air, yeah, this is one of those things you normally wouldn't. You get into things like this is a chimney that you really can't see the top of. This chimney, I think, was 8 feet high, from the roof up there. And so from here, I can see that number one, there's no storm cap or spark arrestor. There's no the crown is cracked.
Yeah.
There's no 2-inch, clay flue liner extension. So there's a bunch of problems, as well as I can see that the chimney has been repaired and there's another crack in the masonry. Right now, would I have seen this?
Is that flue tile liner also cracked? It's hard to tell from the picture.
Well, now you're making me go back and remember. But
that looks like a gas. No, it's bird poop. False alarm, everybody. We have a poop.
Okay, but
situation.
Looking at this photo right here, you would agree this is pretty impressive vantage point.
Yeah.
For an inspection, right? Like there's not much you're not going to see with this drone. And to be honest, I went all the way around that chimney, 360 degrees. There's probably 30 photos of that chimney.
Yeah. And this is an example of more of an exception than the rule, in my opinion. So you mentioned before, like you made that assessment just from that photo that you showed me. To be honest with you, that's just called being a good home inspector. If we can't look at, let's step back for a moment and let's talk about Zillow photos. I can usually, from a Zillow photo, tell you about half of what's going on with a house, just from looking at the outside of it, street view, whatever. And okay, I've been doing it for 19 years. Me and Jay Wynn, another home inspector, we love to send each other photos and say, what's wrong here? It takes a good home inspector to say, you know what, this is the roof for a drone, and this one is the roof for me to walk on. This is a roof for me to do both. And if we can't make that assessment and we're looking for a rule, well, we're not going to find one because it's a tool. It's just like, oh, cool. The screws on this electric panel, they were flathead. Oh, these ones are hexed. So I'm not going to try to make the flathead fit the hexed screw. I'm going to get a different bit out and open it a different way. So a drone has its uses. I totally agree.
Now that I can tell you, another one of my arguments was going to be, there's probably been a dozen instances in the last 3 years that I've been using a drone where I actually found something that I didn't see when I walked it.
Interesting.
So I always go home and I always zoom in and I always look really carefully at things because when I walk it, I have a very limited vantage point. I can only get to what I can walk to and see with my eyes, and unless I'm crawling around. Now, a lot of times you have, eaves, like sections of eaves where you can't really get under there. Sometimes there's only a 7 or 8 inch gap and, you can try to look underneath, but sometimes you can't. But when you can get a drone under there and you can adjust the aperture and the brightness, and you have that control of the camera to be able to shoot things, it's really nice to be able to go home and go, you know what, I didn't see that while I was up there. I'm glad I shot this footage. And that's another reason that I've become a very strong advocate for using a drone on roofs. Here's another one that I brought up tonight, just as kind of a cheap shot to you.
Nice.
This is a real inspection. This is a house that not only did I inspect this is featured in some of my online videos. And then we did a field trip here. As a matter of fact, hold on one second. I'm going to add this. Hold on one second. I'm going to introduce you to Inspector Kelsey. Kelsey, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. How you doing?
Man, I'm glad to see you down there in the green room because this is a house you actually inspected with me.
Yes, it is.
Very
All right.
cool.
Now, Ian, would you walk that roof?
The answer is depends. So usually there's a flat roof on the top, and there's usually this wonky wooden ladder in the attic next to a chimney or something crazy where you climb up and you push the hatch open. Is there one of those?
There is, yeah.
Okay, then yeah.
And you can see it, and I did put that photo in, so I wasn't going to totally take a cheap shot at you, but there you go.
Oh, yep.
Yeah,
so I totally would have.
All right, you would have walked this part of the roof, but you would not have walked. Oops,
no,
the wrong part.
The sides of it would have gotten a ladder.
So you would have gone up with a ladder and gone around this whole eave
To
look at the slate.
I don't know if I would have gone up over the front door, but yeah, pretty much. And then I I would have charged a lot extra for this house. I don't. Hopefully, you guys charged for it. But
Now,
yeah,
now here,
I
this is
agree.
an
A house like
angle.
this, the drone is an advantage. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a great vantage point right here of something you could not have gotten to with a ladder. There literally was no way to get to that section of the roof. There was no way
over the
even to
door.
see it. You can't get it from the top either, right? So this was an example of a photograph that I would not have been able to see had I could not have even got a doka pole up that high.
Mm-hmm.
So the only way to get that photo that you're looking at right now is with a drone. And if you look at that photo, there's some really interesting stuff that you'd want to take a closer look at. And the ability to zoom into these things and actually see if...
Is that an old Philadelphia gutter?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but somebody less experienced, or maybe if I had a crappier vantage point, I might have thought that was a hole in the roof. I could have thought anything, really.
So I guess that comes back down to being a good home inspector. So I know Philadelphia gutters usually went on those homes, and 99.9% of the time they didn't exist, and they were, forgive my language, they were pretty crappily plastered over. Basically, they're just, let's throw some crap over this and make it look better so it doesn't leak.
No, I agree. Yeah.
That would have been something that I actually typically on these houses, quote unquote, pre-call out until proven otherwise.
So I'm with you there. And when I see different types of tar sealants or mastic or anything like that, that's something that I'd love to take a much closer look at, because obviously, as you know, sealants crack, peel, you never know what you're going to get. And so I don't know how
black hole.
It does actually. I don't know how you would have looked at this without a drone. It was the only tool in my toolbox to actually get a full coverage of this home. And this is a very old home. This is a 200-year-old house.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to do a thorough job. I saw slate. I saw metal replacement, shingles where the slate was broken. There was a lot going on here. And to be honest, this is the short side of the house. This is a huge mansion. And Kelsey can attribute, she can chime in on that. Kelsey, in your region, what percentage of roofs are walkable?
Ooh, what percentage? That's a very good question. Maybe half?
Okay, and are you in Connecticut?
I'm in Massachusetts, Central Mass.
That's what I thought. But you corrected me the other day, I thought, in that group, and told me Connecticut, because I told Brent you were in Massachusetts. But anyway.
Oh, no, I'm in Mass.
Okay. So if half the roofs aren't walkable, how do you inspect the roofs you can't walk?
With a doka pole, hopefully with a drone, or I have to disclaim the roof entirely, depending on the situation.
Okay, so you do use a drone.
I currently do not, but I would like to.
Okay.
Once I've got that FAA license, I will be using a drone.
Thank you for getting licensed. Appreciate
thanks
that.
for doing that, Kelsey. You're the best.
It's the right thing to do.
It is the right thing to do. Good job.
Yeah,
I don't know you, Kelsey, but it's nice to meet you.
Kelsey came to my retreat, and we did a field trip to this house. This was a really interesting house, by the way. But so are you of the opinion that a drone? Oh yeah, Brent just chimed in. He's like, "Hey, I know that house." He was there for the field trip as well. But you agree that if you can't walk the roof, the drone is the best option, right?
Do I agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
If I can't walk a roof, a drone, is likely the best option, because even with the doka pole, whatever I could see with that, a drone could see exactly the same thing. The only disadvantage to a drone is potentially wind or air restrictions, if you're thinking about FAA flight restrictions. And then I can't actually touch something. But like you had mentioned earlier, you can put a claw on the end of a doka pole, and I guess that solves that problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I have a fitting just for that. I actually have several fittings for mine that screw on for different things. I have one that actually clamps. It's like a jaw. It's got I used a reacher assembly. I pull a string. But anyway, and would you agree that the best inspection would be to use a drone and walk the roof?
I would agree with that.
Ian, I'm sorry, I have to claim victory in this bout.
So I think you claim victory in the exception instead of the rule. But I will acquiesce that you win in the exception category.
All right, I'm gonna.
I know. I fight hard.
So I'm gonna throw this up real quick. If you guys want to take a live poll, take a picture of this, use your camera, the QR code, or go to that link. We still got more to discuss here. We've got one more guest too, and I got a lot of stuff to discuss.
I've got some
Ian.
pictures I'm working on sharing with you right now. We can talk a little more about my experience and my opinion here, because I got more to add.
Yeah. I want to hear it. For sure. I want to leave this up on the screen for a minute so people can chime in, take the live poll. We can see if anybody, what other people's opinions are.
How many times can I vote for myself, Preston?
It's gonna log them, and I'm gonna tease you. I'm gonna point it out. So, and this poll really isn't a vote for me or Ian. It's really just kind of a temperature read to see what was your opinion. Did it change? As you heard this discussed.
And here's what I'm voting for: walk the roof when safe. Use drone when you can't walk. And the emphasis on the word can't.
I'm gonna say always use a drone 100% of the time. Document every square inch of that roof and study it when you get home, and walk the roof when it's safe and you can do it. That to me is the best methodology and the best practice, because there's really no other way to encapsulate and get a snapshot in time and document the roof condition on the day that you did the inspection. And a lot can happen to a roof the day after you do an inspection.
Can I add one more thing while the people are taking the poll?
Sure.
So one of the best roofers I've ever met, and I've told this story before, I went up on a big commercial building I was inspecting, and this roofing company was there, and I hired them, and the guy said, "Can I show you some things?" Older guy, I say older, like probably mid to late 60s. And I learned so much from him, because I said, it's a visual inspection, blah, blah. And he stopped me right there and he goes, "Whoa, I want you to, does this roof look good?" I'm like, "Yeah, it looks good, but I haven't inspected it yet." He's like, "Okay, look harder." And he let me walk around, and the roof was only 5 years old. He's like, "Now let me show you something." He walks over to where the EPDM was sealed along the edge, and he pushed on it and water shot out. And he goes, "Now watch this." And he lifted a flap and water poured out. He would stick his finger around the edges, and his finger would come out wet. He goes, "This roof is 5 years old. They paid like 80 grand for it, and it's in failure." He goes, "Never trust your eyes." And I've lived by that. I'm like, if I can ever touch and grab and feel the roof as much as possible, I learned so much from that guy. We actually used him for commercial inspections quite a bit. But beautiful 5-year-old roof, would never have been able to see it. It could only have been felt. So there's applications for both. That's why I say walk when possible.
I agree with that.
When is it?
Go ahead.
When is it possible to walk a roof? How do you determine whether you're going to walk it or not?
Well, that's different for everybody. So I'm in good shape and in good health, and I'm a little bit stupid. So I'm going to get on a lot of stuff that I probably shouldn't. If we're 65, not in great shape, and our knees can't take it, the percentage goes way down for them. 20% of roofs may be accessible for them, whereas 80% may be accessible for me. So that really comes down to the individual inspector.
And I agree with that. It's funny because I actually, many, many decades ago, I had a commercial sign company. So I used to do signage, and we used to be really high up in the air, do freeway signs, things like that. So I got very comfortable walking around on high things. It doesn't really bother me much. And I'm like you, Ian. I take a lot of risks. I had a commercial inspection Friday. That was one of the sketchiest roof walks I've ever had in my life. And I wasn't going to originally walk the roof. But when I flew the drone over it, I saw some concerns and some issues. We're talking about a roof that was snow covered. So that was one of those ones that I took some test steps to make sure I tied myself off, as best I could. There were 2 areas I wanted to get up there and look at, and I did. And I'm not sorry I did it, but I took some risks I shouldn't. It really shouldn't have, if you're going to be reasonable. But I agree with you that it's kind of a judgment call for every inspector to be able to say, all right, I'm going to go for this one.
Yeah. And also the conditions. In my area, we have 6 months of winter. So when it's not snowing, it's raining. So I'm not far from you, Kelsey. When it's not snowing, it's raining. When it's not raining, it's snowing. So listen, I'm not going to go up and leave my family without a husband and a father because I said I want to get to this section of that roof. That's when a drone comes in. That's when the pole comes in. That's when I disclaim that section of roof. And I honestly tell people, hey, listen, roof is snow covered. I can't get to that section. Did the best I could. I've only, in my 19 years of inspecting, I think maybe one or two people complain when there's snow on the roof. And I'm like, it doesn't matter if I have a drone or anything at this point. I'm like, it's all covered in a foot of snow. And then it's like, as a courtesy, I go pick up the radon test and I'm like, okay, let's go look at the roof. If there was no radon test, I'm charging to go back. It's like, it's not the end.
I have a return list. So in the winter, when I have to check the box that says, snow cover or, frost limitation, their address goes into a scheduler that I have. And I always ask them what their window is, like, what's your transaction window? And if I can get back to that house before their transaction window, and we have any melt off, I will go and I'll go through my list. And I've taken days off before, and I've gone and done 6 or 7 roofs in one day just to get them because I couldn't see them on the day of the inspection.
Oh, that's a nice thing to do. I'm sure your clients appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's funny because we've had a few where we're like, man, I'm so glad I looked at that because that was a train wreck.
Yeah,
and,
I had an inspection one time where I had gotten food poisoning, and I did the inspection and I let them know, and I wrote in the report that I'd like to come back and do the rest of the inspection. And I'm glad I did that because I went back and found some stuff, and the attorneys are like, no, you can't do this. And then my client's attorney is like, actually, he wrote it in the report, so this is part of due diligence. Deal with it, pal.
Yeah.
We got to take care of our clients because they're buying a house. That's expensive. That's a big deal. Yeah. So what you did, that's good care for your client. I like that.
Yeah, it's actually standard operating procedure for me. It's like and right now I've got 4 houses on a return list. So as soon as we get melt off, if we do, I'm going to go through that list and go get those roofs done.
Nice.
The roof is one of the most important things on a house. It's just one of those things that I don't take lightly. And if I can't get to it, my report says, if we can't get this done, I recommend you get it checked out before closing.
It's funny.
Contractor or something.
We've always said that the roof of a house is kind of like the head of the house. But then the attic is the lungs of the house. Like, I'm just envisioning this person. It's a really weird looking dude with lungs in his head. Sorry. Weird tangents.
Listen, was that a cheap shot on me? Because I know I got kind of a big head.
Oh, do you? I didn't even know.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't a cheap shot at you. I was just verbally going through my head and being weird.
I know we'd established to protect ourselves at all times, but that was a grind shot, Ian.
Yeah, wait, you said groin shots are allowed. Like, no? Okay.
I wasn't serious.
Okay. Well, I have a bag of nickels here. We'll swing that next.
Kelsey, do you have anything else you want to add?
I sent those pictures over to you if you want to pull those up for a second. Ian, where did you say you were from?
I'm in upstate New York.
Okay, you're not too far. So you got some pretty old houses up there as well. The ones around in my area, the city of Worcester is actually known for what we call triple deckers, which are 3-story. Sorry, I'm getting some notifications. 3-story multifamily properties. Mm-hmm. And even, let's say, if the roof is flat, it's probably a 50-50 toss up of whether or not it still has that, rickety wood ladder access anymore, like the one with the mansard roof that Preston had shown a few minutes ago. So in a situation like that, I'm not going to put up, the ladder.
Yeah, that's
40-foot ladder might not even reach it. That's not going to be feasible.
Yeah.
This is from an inspection that I did last week. And it's a single family, 2, arguably 3 stories, depending on which part of the house you're looking at. And looking at it from the ground, I can see that something's fishy about this, right? If you look along the ridge line, you can see it looks a little bit swollen. And I'm sure you've seen 2 layers of asphalt roofing material in a house before, maybe even 3, right?
Oh,
but still, that looks pretty bulbous.
It's lumpy.
2-3 layers, right?
Yeah,
it's pretty lumpy looking. I can tell that something is going on here from the ground, and it's abnormal. Even considering defects like 2 layers worth of roof. And if you click up to another picture,
and this would have been an application for a drone.
Well,
did you walk it? Was there?
I did.
Did you go out the window?
I did go out the window. Actually,
that's the way to do it.
Whether I can,
the dormer on the front.
Yeah, if there's a window that I can use to access the roof, that's going to be way safer for a home inspector to use that route than climbing up to the top of a ladder and then having no point to grab onto and secure yourself. I'm assuming you didn't have anybody up there ahead of time to put up a harness or a tie-off system. That's oftentimes going to be, well, it is the most dangerous thing for a home inspector to do is climb from the top of a ladder to a rooftop. So if I can avoid that, I'm totally going to avoid that. I'm climbing out the window, absolutely. And then it's just a matter of determining, okay, what are the risk factors in this situation? So here it's nighttime, but I climbed out the window, so whatever. It was dry, not. I mean, it was cold, but
How long have you been an
it wasn't
inspector, Kelsey?
freezing. Since 2019.
Okay. If I could, just out of concern for you, I never
Sure.
inspect at night. There are too many variables that.
What do you mean?
So you can shine a flashlight all you like, but
Sure.
the temperature drops quickly at night, so any bit of moisture becomes a little bit more slick. The the granulars actually get a little bit more rigid in the cold on the shingles, and
Yep.
it's easier to slip down them. If you need
Yes.
emergency services, it's a little harder at night. Just be careful with yourself.
That's the
Yes.
best argument right there. Yeah, you fall off the
Well,
roof,
hey.
nobody's coming for you till morning.
Yeah, nobody's going to pay me enough money to end my career. That's just
Well,
it's
I
not
just
going to be worth it for sure. So, in normal circumstances, I would not have climbed a roof at night, but it happened
All
to
right.
be that later in the inspection, when
I
I
got
did
a
have access
question.
to the interior.
I got a
That makes
question for
sense.
both of you before we move on from this. One of the arguments that we hear in the groups all the time is, well, how are you going to assess whether there's more than 2 layers of roof covering if you don't walk the roof?
You can do that.
I'm going to ask. I was going to say, so do both of you agree that any good, home inspector should be able to see signs of excessive layers of roof covering without walking on the roof? We all
Kelsey,
agree, right?
Yeah, Kelsey just did that with the pictures. It's just like,
Yeah.
all right,
And
you can tell from the ground.
If you want to pull those pictures back up, there's one where you can see the roof from underneath. You're looking at the soffit and then sort of an extension. The reason why it looked particularly bulbous is this roof was 2 layers of asphalt on top of a cedar shake.
Right. Yeah, and I saw that. I actually did show that photo while you were talking.
And I threw in the one of me hanging my head over the side just because, Ian, you mentioned that a few minutes ago. I heard that while I was throwing the pictures in the folder. So
I appreciated that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is that, again, that was my argument at the destination. All of us as home inspectors are only doing a few things. We're observing, we're reporting, and making a recommendation. And we report our observation and then recommend what to do next. And in that recommendation, we also say what the consequence would be if you don't fix this. And if you use a drone and you arrive at a further evaluation, you say, I noticed lumpiness in the roof. It appears to me that there was excessive, layers of roof covering. The flashing, had shingles around them. The apron section was covered. Whatever your observations are, and you say, I recommend further evaluation by a qualified roofing contractor. And Ian walks the roof and comes to that same conclusion and says, I walked the roof and saw lumpiness, whatever, and I lifted up the shingles and I was able to visualize 3 layers of shingles because I walked it. He arrives at the same destination. I recommend further evaluation by a roofing contractor.
I see your argument there. Basically, if you get to the same end, does it matter how you got there? Because the roofer's still going to need to go and check it out. My argument is you don't always reach the same end. That EPDM roof that I mentioned, if it had just been inspected by a drone, the drone user would have likely passed, quote unquote, passed the roof and like, hey, yeah, everything's fine, functional, 5 years old, no reason to have a problem with it. I walked it, and a dude showed me the coolest tricks that I've ever learned in my inspection career. And I'm like, this whole thing is in failure, and it was an $80,000 roof.
But we agree that's an exception, not a rule, and that's probably only happened a couple times in your whole career, right?
An EPDM roof is one of the only roofing materials that's actually designed to take even light foot traffic.
That is true.
No, they all have a rating for how much weight and traffic it can take, because a roof still needs to be serviceable. But
for flat roofs or pitched roofs?
For pitched roofs. Even in installation, you still need to walk on the shingles to an extent.
But you're still arguably damaging the shingles by knocking off granules. If you look at a roof after a solar panel installation's been done, I know exactly how everybody got up there because I can see that that area of roof is missing
And-
a lot of granules.
And that's the argument that a lot of people make, that you should never walk on a roof because you damaged the roof. Technically, on any level, anything that you walk on or touch gets damaged at any level.
Correct.
The roof is being damaged at what they consider an acceptable rate to be serviced. Now, it takes a good inspector to know it's 110 degrees outside on a dark pewter roof. And if I step on this thing, my foot sticks. I'm not walking that. Or when it's cold outside, I'm not walking.
I'm really glad you brought up that point, because that was actually one of my questions. I'm looking over at my questions, and one of my questions was, do you agree that walking on a roof usually damages it, even if just a small amount? And I think that there's an argument to be made. And I made this in one of the groups that then got screenshotted and used in somebody else's videos to make me look bad. I was making a point that if we go back to rule number 1, home inspections are visual, non-invasive, non-destructive. And anything you do beyond that is exceeding the standards of practice. And if we're all to agree that you can't really walk on a roof without damaging it even just a tiny bit, there is an argument to be made that we should try as much as we can not to damage homes. Now, what I will say is that it usually doesn't damage the roof to walk on a low pitch. If it's 412 or even 612, if you're in a good mood. It doesn't, and it's not super hot outside and the roof's in good condition, whatever. You might knock off a couple granules. It's not the end of the world, but I wouldn't use that as an excuse not to walk the roof. However, I think that it's really hard to walk an 812 or 1012 pitch, even if you're roped off, without, and then we start talking about your ladder scratching the gutters, and there's a lot of things that can damage homes, which is why the builders are now prohibiting home inspectors from doing those things, because they do cause damage doing those roof inspections. And in those cases, I would say that 99% of the time, the drone would be a good option. Do you disagree with that?
I think that's taking my statement maybe in a different direction than my intent. If you were to say that a roof should never be walked on because it damages the roof,
which I didn't say.
No. I'm saying it as a hypothetical.
Mm-hmm.
How would you service your chimney? How would you get a chimney sweep up there? So that's like taking your heating unit and burying it in the ground. Now it can never be serviced. No one can ever get to it. Your chimney can never be cleaned. You can never put zinc strips up. You can never service your solar panels. You can never service your anything, because now that's an untouchable surface if you take it that route.
But I know that roofing contractors actually have implements they can use, like tiger paws. They'll use boom lifts. They'll use things to prevent damaging roofs, whereas a less experienced home inspector might just run around and do more damage than those people.
Well, so here's what the IBC says, International Building Code Standard, says about roofs. It says roofs are engineered to meet specific load-bearing standards that account for both static, like shingles and decking, and dynamic loads, such as foot traffic. It actually requires it. So temporary weight, such as workers during maintenance and things like that. So by International Building Code standards, a roof is to be walkable. It is actually one of its functions.
Kelsey, real quick, I'm going to thank you for being on. I gotta make room on the screen because I got to present the poll while Ian and I finish up our discussion. Thank you so much.
Right.
You're one of the best.
Thanks for having me.
So
Great meeting you,
Appreciate
Kelsey.
you too. Good to meet you too, Ian. Have a good night, guys.
Yeah, thanks for sparring.
She's a really good inspector, by the way.
No, she seems like it. She seems really knowledgeable too.
All right, so I will have you know that here, I'm going to throw this up on the screen. Looky here, Ian. We are neck and neck, man.
Is that real? We're 50 and 50?
Yeah.
Hang on, can I vote again? Let's make it 51 and 50. Wait, that doesn't add up. 51-49.
Here's what I will say. I appreciate this discussion so much because having a talk like this, you and I don't agree on this, right? Like up to this point tonight, we didn't agree on roof inspections. We were kind of like, you're a walk guy, I'm a drone guy. But what most people don't know is that me being an advocate for a drone doesn't mean that I don't walk roofs. It means that I think doing both is the best option always. And if I can use a drone and walk the roof, that is what I'm going to do. And what I get a lot is, and here's the problem. We see it in politics. We see it everywhere else. If you say to somebody, well, I'm not crazy about Hillary Clinton, they automatically assume you love Donald Trump, but you can't be one of those guys that's like, I don't know. I like Ron Paul. Like, it's hard to be in a polarized place where everybody assumes that it's either or, it's plus minus, black, white. There's no gray area in between. And these discussions are really good to be able to say, there's gray area in between. There's actually thousands of colors in between. And for me to say that I'm pro drone doesn't mean that I'm anti-walking.
And same thing here. Just because I'm pro getting up in there and getting your hands into it doesn't mean that I don't think you shouldn't have a drone. I think it's a very useful tool that should be part of our equipment.
So and I agree with you 100%. And it's like everything else. I would agree that I think if people had civil discourse and the ability to disagree with each other and still respect each other, they would find out they have a lot more in common. And maybe they see things a little more just like the other person that they assumed was their adversary. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. If, like we said at the beginning, if we had less keyboard cowboying and more discussion, we'd have a much more civil way about ourselves as an industry. But I gotta say, Preston, this was a load of fun because I don't like to argue, but I like to debate. I like to think about things and come at it from different angles. I had a blast. All of your guests were awesome. I'm not trying to blow smoke at you here, but Joe was great. Kelsey was great. Fletch was great. I don't really know any of them, and have them come on and hear their opinions and me talk about my side with or against them. That was a load of fun. I like this format.
Yeah, man, I'm having fun too. For me, it's like we see these arguments so often and it never really gets discussed in a meaningful way because you can't really do it in Facebook posts, right? It's really hard to do that. And it's usually 12 posts until the name calling starts. And hopefully this can be a video that people can go to say, you know what, they both had good points. And maybe my mind changed. Maybe it didn't.
See, I'm hoping that everybody learns from this podcast that I was right.
Hopefully what they take away from it is that we were both right.
I know, I'm just joking. That's going to be taken out as a soundbite and used against me later.
Yeah.
That's
all
awesome.
Right. So my plan is to take more of these hot debated topics, the things where people are just at each other's throats over these things on a regular basis. The next topic is going to be sewer scopes.
Ooh.
There's quite a few home inspectors right now that are saying that home inspectors shouldn't do sewer scopes. That should always be outsourced to a qualified septic or sewer contractor, a septic service contractor, and that we are not qualified to be doing sewer scopes.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
So hopefully you'll be able to call in as a guest and chime in on the next one. That's going to be the next episode. Ian, I got to thank you, man. Thanks for being on and willing to do this with me. And I have nothing but respect for you. Everything you're doing is amazing.
Same here. And I really liked your arguments. You made some great points. And like I said, this was a blast. So thank you for putting it together. Nothing but respect for you. And this is great.
Yeah. Hey, thanks everybody for being here. The comments are full, man. It's really cool to see. And I'm going to post this video. We'll be able to get this out there into some other places as well. So Ian, have a good night and wish you guys a Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Have a great time and we'll talk soon.
Sounds great.
Bye.